managing your stress when you work hard.
Mm-hmm.
What is the literature saying about that in terms of, I mean, I guess it comes down to sleep, exercise, nutrition again, and also your community. But what would you say about that?
Firstly, what I would say is, remember at the beginning I talked about stepping outside of the lane.
Yeah,
this is me going a little bit outside of my primary lane. But I can tell you what I do and what the research.
Yeah, what do you do?
The research that I've read, and I'm sure there's a psychologist or psychiatrist that can build on this.
You're not talking about the psychology, but you're talking about the nutritional and the physicality of
and my lifestyle.
Stress.
What do I do to manage stress?
Yep.
Right. So there's a great body of research. This is outside of nutrition, looking at the benefit of having quality relationships in helping buffer stress. So people that have quality relationships, and when I think of a quality relationship, I think about who are the people that you can kind of surround yourself with, where you can be your absolute self. You can take off the mask.
No one's judging you.
No one's judging you. There's no shame. There's guilt. You can speak about the things that are. You can get things off your chest. You can help them. It's a mutually beneficial connection where you can talk about things maybe that are causing stress, and that person, you trust them enough to share that. This is I think a little bit less intuitive for men. Often, certainly has been in my experience.
Definitely for my generation.
And that person, they might be able to help you. They might be able to offer a different perspective, but also there's benefit in them just listening and you just feeling like you're understood.
You're not looking for a solution.
No, and there's some really interesting research in this space, some that kind of shocked me. That dates back years ago, where they looked at, they basically punctured people's forearms, right, to create a wound. And they were looking at how long it took for that wound to heal. And they had already put people into categories based on whether they had healthy relationships in their life or whether they had relationships with a lot of tension and a lot of unresolved conflict, or in one category, relationships that were unilateral, so caregivers, right, where they were looking after often sick people.
They got nothing back, so to speak.
Yeah. People that were not in a position to give back, not through any fault of their own, but they were often, disabled or very sick. And on average in this study, it took about 5 weeks for the wound to heal. But people who had tension-filled relationships, quote unquote toxic relationships, it took an extra 7 to 10 days to heal. And caregivers, it took even longer to heal, right? And there's been a lot of research done since then to kind of understand the mechanisms. But when you study the biology of people and you look at things like inflammation and levels of oxytocin and neurotransmitters that make us feel good, these are different in people depending on the relationships they have in their life. So people that have really good support networks, healthy relationships, they have less chronic inflammation. They have higher levels of these neurotransmitters that help them feel good. And
when you say neurotransmitters, you mean those chemicals?
Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. These are things that give us motivation, drive, happiness. We feel good.
Closeness.
Right. And just to kind of tie the loop back to kind of work-life stress, there's other research that's looked at pain and perceived stress. And this is really, really interesting and important work where they put humans into an MRI, functional MRI scanner, and was scanning their brain and subjected them to pain. So imagine like pin pricking into their arm. And they had different conditions. One where that person's just on their own. And how much pain do you feel? Then the next is like that person is subjected to the same sensory input, but someone's holding their hand, a stranger.
And they want to see what lights up and doesn't light up.
And they're looking at the areas of the brain that perceive pain. How active are they? And then they look at a third condition where someone you love, maybe it's your daughter or son or your partner, your dad, your mom, someone you love's holding your hand. And what you see is that area of the brain that perceives pain lights up most when no one's holding your hand. It lights up a little bit less when a stranger's holding your hand, and it's least active when someone that you love is holding your hand. And then that research has been kind of built upon by a whole body of research showing that people who work in a stressful environment and have a lot of sort of chronic stress from whatever business activity they have, they actually perceive in their life that they have less stress if they have healthy relationships, right? So if you're someone that's working in a business and your goal is to be a good leader, to make good decisions, to be less irritable, all these things that we think are really important to being a productive person within business, then you should be thinking about relationships as a way to dampen and buffer that stress and actually improve your productivity within the workplace. So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question.
You did. And I might just extrapolate something because I think it's important. The reasoning behind you drawing an analogy with the cut to the arm and the time it takes for that to heal is that that's effectively just a stress. You might have an emotional stress, a mental stress, or that's a physical stress. And what you said is that the people who had the close relationships, they healed at a faster rate than the other two categories. And that's an extrapolation, but it's about stress. Stress could be mental, could be physical. You might have injured yourself, whatever. The point is, in all those stressful situations, it's relationships that help you heal or deal with those stresses at a faster rate. Doesn't mean you won't. You're not going to avoid stress.
You're not going to avoid the stress, but you're going to be more resilient to
how
it.
well you deal with it.
So you'll be better at recovering. We know that people that are better able to deal with stress have lower risk of infection, or when they get an infection, they heal quicker. So it's about resilience.
I must be doing something right because I've always been a quick, fast healer. I'm happy about that. I feel good about that now. Like you've made me think to myself, well, Mark, there's something going on there. Unless I have some genetic predisposition to heal faster, maybe I've got to thank my mum and dad for that.
And the other bit that I would just add there is there's some other fantastic research looking at ways to buffer stress, and one of the big ones is helping other people. Yeah, being of service.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's funny. I was listening to a podcast the other day about leadership, and that individual who's an ex-Navy SEAL, but was talking about leadership. He's also in business, but leadership in business is not about telling people what to do, but it's about having relationships within your business. He didn't talk about outside the business, but having relationships within your business, and having the ability to, and that comes down to how you speak to people. And, your language, the speed at which you talk, how you interact with individuals. And made me just think, because Sammy, our producer, just asked me the question, I'm just wondering whether or not if I might be stressing him out more recently. Because I did actually send him a text yesterday about something which I was just challenging an idea and an idea of the team in here. And I thought, I'd actually listened to that podcast, and I thought long and hard about the language I used in relation to how I put it to them. Long and hard. I put it to them in an email or a text, I can't remember, but Sam will remember. And it makes sense. You've got to have, and by the way, work relationships are important too. It's not just your loved one, your work relationships too.
Yeah. I like the fact that you had the awareness to pause on that.
Yeah.
And obviously you have the relationship where you're feeling comfortable to be able to express those things.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also important that, because we don't want to go the other direction where in business we think, particularly if we're leading a business, where we think that we can't say something because someone's going to get upset and they're going to run off to HR. That doesn't work either. I mean, but the answer to it is up to the individual who's making the approach to think it through. And it's not about, I don't want to upset them. It's not about that. It's about being effective. The most effective process is to word it properly, time it properly, and respond again and respond again. And if you think that they might have misinterpreted what you said, then respond again.
Right. Yeah. That's something I've had to learn.
Yeah, I've had to learn too.
I often thought that if I love someone, that, I should just sweep hard things underneath the carpet. But if you really love someone, you should figure out a way to deliver feedback that will help them.
Yeah.
In a way that is not going to be, attacking or argumentative.
Or seen as that.
So I think the piece that you're talking about, where you pause a little bit before the communication, I think that comes with age.
Yeah, unfortunately.